Coming in, just come on in and find a seat. Just please socially distance as we are here at the Capitol, as I think we are everywhere, if you can do that. And I want to thank a couple of folks as we begin the meeting of our Senate Appropriations Judicial Subcommittee. First, I want to thank, of course, Chairman Tillery for the hard work that he has done on behalf of the Senate and our Appropriations Committee. He has spent countless hours doing the work that he needs to do, but also getting us to the point where we can have our subcommittee meetings. I want to thank the members of this committee. I appreciate your service and the work that we will do in the days ahead. And I want to thank also Andrew Zoll to my right. And I appreciate you and the work that you have done and that you will continue to do to help us do what we've got to do. So with that, if there are no comments or questions from the committee, we will begin per the agenda, and I think we'll hear first from the Court of Appeals.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Good morning.
I'm Chris McFadden. I'm the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals. As all of you know, we have original appellate jurisdiction over most
Which
cases.
one is his mic?
We have primary
Which one is his mic?
responsibility in ordinary cases
Thank you.
for making sure the rule of law is a tangible reality throughout the state. You may not know that Georgia is the largest state in the union with a single intermediate appellate court with statewide jurisdiction. That gives Georgians a significant advantage over citizens of other states where the writs of intermediate appellate courts don't run past a county line. A Georgian is able to get an answer to a difficult legal question that is authoritative throughout the state in a way that competitors in California, Texas, and Florida cannot. It is a high honor to be entrusted with that responsibility, and we are grateful to you for providing us the resources to discharge it effectively. I'd like to take just one moment more to mark the passing of our longtime fiscal director, Jan Kelly. She was with the court for over 20 years. She was extraordinarily committed, diligent, and able. We relied on her. She kept us out of trouble, and she is greatly missed. And I would also like to introduce or acknowledge our new Director of Financial Services, Chris Walker, who comes to us from the Department of Corrections, where he served as Director of Strategic Planning and Management. He's doing fine work, and we are pleased to have him. With that, I will turn it over to our Budget Chair, Presiding Judge Sarah Doyle.
Thank you, Judge McFadden. Welcome, Judge Doyle. Nice to have you with us.
Good morning, and I will keep this as brief as possible. We initially had no request in our supplemental, and last fall we met with former Chair Andy Welch to go over our budget request, as we do every fall when he's been the chair. And through those discussions, he elicited from us the fact that we had in fact incurred approximately $51,000 in cost associated with the pandemic, dealing with going virtual for hearings and for meetings, everything that all of you all had to deal with as well. And so he suggested that we submit a supplemental to him, and we sent it over to Andrew Zoll as well. And on that, we ask for those $50,000, approximately $51,000, 40 of which is a one-time cost, and those are broken down on the information that we've given you. And we also ask for funds to reflect the salary and travel for a temporary judge. As you may or may not know, one of our judges has been suspended with pay. This was not something we were aware of back when we were submitting our request in September. And that is $114,000 for the next 6 months. Judge Phipps returned to us at the very beginning of January. We also ask that 3 days of our furlough days. Back in the end of last year, our budget was cut $216,000, which was attributable to the furlough days of those people making over $100,000. And we took 2 of those days in the fall, and we're hoping that we could get the remainder of it, 3 days of it, this part, funded, and that's $108,000. One of the things that isn't apparent is you also reduced us $260,000 in hard expenses, and we did not ask to get that put back in, but we would really like you to consider the $51,000 that the House didn't put in for those additional costs we had associated with the pandemic. So if you have any questions about that or anything else budget related, I'll do my best
Okay.
to answer it.
Any questions from the committee? No questions. Andrew, any questions? Okay. Judge Doyle, I think you did a great job. Apparently you have no questions, so thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for your hard work down here. And we'll let you get on to the next one.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Judge McFadden, for being here.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next, we've got the statewide business courts. And I know I received a message. Judge Davis had a conflict, and I appreciate him reaching out to me, and we're delighted that you're here with us.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Angie Davis, and I serve as the clerk of the Georgia Statewide Business Court. And Judge Davis did want to make sure that I sent his apology. Chairman, he is actually, I think, in your neck of the woods speaking to the Macon Rotary Club this afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
If I could give you just a very brief background, and we only have a few points. As you are probably aware, Judge Davis was appointed in July of 2019, and he began his term in January of 2020. I was appointed late July of 2020 and started when we opened the doors on August 1st. And I believe the initial budget for the court was $998,000 as a startup cost to get the court going. In July of 2020, we informed the Appropriations Committee that we were returning $119,000 to the state treasury, noting that there may be, we may experience some unforeseen startup costs going forward. And we did, in fact, experience some unforeseen expenses, all of which are reflected in the supplemental and the FY 2022 budget. There are three categories of those expenses. The first of which is the clerk of court salary, which that salary is set by enabling statute and is pegged to the clerk of the Court of Appeals. And that salary in the original budget was by way of a little under $20,000. The next item would be mail costs that were not originally budgeted. The agencies over at the Nathan Deal Judicial Center contract with GTA to facilitate the distribution of the mail, and we were short in being able to cover the two-time pickup of the mail. And then the third expense that was not anticipated originally was the rental expense with GBA. The build-out of the court, of the business court, was in two phases. Originally, the build-out was the chambers and the clerk's office and those office suites, and that was what was originally budgeted as the rental expense. The next phase was the completion of the courtroom, which was completed late November, and GBA began billing for those total cost, the office suites, the courtroom, the atrium, and the common spaces that are shared by the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, began billing for that in totality January 1st of this year. And so those costs are represented in line 13.3. One other item, because the court opened its doors August 1st, and the budget year started on July 1st, we were able to save some personnel funding resources by doing some delayed starts, rolling some start dates. And so we do anticipate that at the end of this fiscal year, we're hopeful to turn over some of those personnel dollars back to the state treasury. And I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions from the committee?
What we've had thus far in 2020, we had 17 cases filed, and since the beginning of the year, month of January, we've had 5 additional cases, so we're up to 22 cases. We've had as of last week, we've officially moved into the courtroom, and we were able to conduct 2 of our hearings, albeit via Zoom, in the courtroom. And a lot of the work that had to be done really immediately August 1st, the fact that we started accepting cases August 1st, and I'll be honest, as the clerk, that was the day I got to see the case management system. So there's so much that has to go into building out those case management systems, really testing the interface between our e-filing system as well. And so our senior chief deputy clerk, Tanisha Manuel, she hails from the AOC, and she's just been a great asset in trying to build the structure of something brand new. So we're hopeful to have more cases come in, but the days are very busy and long. So it's a great team over there.
Any other questions from the committee? Ms. Davis, thank you for being here. Thank you, and give our regards to Judge Davis. And I appreciate the focus that your office and that Judge Davis's office has continued to maintain, notwithstanding sort of a little bit of a zigzag route with regard to exactly what the scope of your court is going to be. But thank you for the stick-to-itiveness to keep on it. Thank you.
We will. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Next is the Judicial Council.
Justice Boggs was just outside, Senator.
Okay.
Justice Boggs?
Good afternoon, Justice Boggs. Well, we're still morning, aren't we? Good morning, Justice Boggs.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to present the Judicial Council amended FY21 budget. I'll draw your attention to Section 6 of your budget documents, particularly first line 17.1, increase funds to upgrade and maintain the Georgia Courts Registrar. The House provided a quarter of the full year's funding, which was $18,750. To give you a brief background of what the registrar is, the AOC, not unlike the state bar, maintains a membership database to house court records of professionals such as court reporters, interpreters, court neutrals, and process servers. The registrar offers a paperless, really seamless registration and certification process to these professionals. The requested funds will be used to upgrade and maintain the registrar to keep records safe and accessible to the clients of the Judicial Council. The application database that program currently operates on is about to be outdated. That application, if remain unpatched and unworked, will likely greatly increase the risk of a cyber attack, as well as the likelihood that it'll be unsupported in modern web servers. To give you an understanding about the breadth and depth of that registrar, we currently house 13,095 court professional records and 6,186 records for the Office of Dispute Resolution's neutrals website or records. So we're asking for $75,000. The House provided a quarter of that. That can help us, I think, moving forward. We can initially do a purchase order with the initial amount and add to the 75 in next year's cycle if we are fortunate enough to get funding for the full amount. So I'm happy to answer questions on the Georgia Courts Registrar. That is 17.1. We would ask for your favorable consideration of that request. Another item that is not in the budget documents, it was a late add, so it's not in your tracking sheet, but is an IT desktop support position. I recognize that historically we typically don't fund positions in a mid-year budget. I want to give you some understanding as to why we're asking for something unusual here. First, the position would be an $88,000 position. That's with fringe. It's roughly about a $54,000 position without. The AOC, not unlike other state agencies, has hosted more than 114 Judicial Council-related virtual meetings since March. Of course, none of us anticipated that. They've had, therefore, about a 650% increase on the demand for technology. We are using our information security officer and our network administrator to help man the IT calls that are coming in to function properly. If this new position was funded earlier, we could really fill a critical need. Half or a quarter of the funding in the mid-year budget would equate to $22,164. So that's what we're asking for in addition to the Georgia Court Registrar's line item number that you do have before you. happy to answer questions, Mr. Chairman, but that's the mid-year budget for the Judicial Council. The Judicial Qualifications Commission is, of course, a part of the Judicial Council budget. Chuck Boring, the Executive Director, is here and will present that portion of the Judicial Council budget if you don't have any questions for me.
Any questions from the committee for Justice Boggs? I don't see any, Justice Boggs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Yes,
your
sir.
attention.
Welcome, Mr. Boring.
Good morning.
Good morning. The floor
Thanks
is
for
yours.
having me. I will try to be brief in that the longer I talk, the longer you have to wait on lunch. So, as you know, I'm now into my first year having been on this job, so I have learned a little bit of what this agency does and the workload that we have. I know that last year we worked fiscal year 2020 with a budget of around $866,000. We had a large budget increase for the agency coming, the pandemic struck, and along with everybody, we did our best to make cuts. And in that, I looked at the experience of our agency. We were able to bring on more experienced people as personnel within the GAQC and actually cut our salary for employees, including myself, by about $30,000 from what it had been before. So for that budget year, we've been operating at $798,000. What our ask is that we're asking for you all to approve what the House has approved is a budget increase of about $26,000 up to about $824 as far as fiscal year, the amended fiscal year 2021. The reason for that is, honestly, me looking at it a little bit. We didn't make an initial ask for the amended fiscal year. We wanted to see how things would progress, how the economy would progress, how our agency would progress. And quite frankly, we've had a couple of investigations, several that aren't public, but a couple that are public now that our agency has never dealt with. We have had to request and employ several other experts and consultants in some of these, to deal with some of these issues. So that ask is to help support us for litigation costs and for expert fees in dealing with some of the litigation we have going forward. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. I would prefer 0 questions, but I'm not as eloquent as Justice Boggs, so I fear what may come.
Questions from the committee? Mr. Boring, just one question. With COVID-19, one could see your workload up, down, or just going sideways. What has been your experience with that?
Remarkably, and I don't know if it's the boring jinx, but our caseload has actually increased. And that's not to say the day-to-day working with the AOC, who's been great, Justice Melton, Justice Boggs, trying to get the courts through dealing with these issues that nobody's ever dealt with before, and looking at it from an ethical standpoint, like ethically, how can the courts go forward and make sure everybody gets their day in court but does it in a safe way? We have actually worked really hard to do that, but our complaint numbers for 2020 were 535 complaints. The year before it was actually 525, and the year before that it was 363. So long story short, our workload actually increased this year during the pandemic. And maybe that's due to people having free time at home and sitting around thinking about how they were wronged. I don't know, but it's kept us busy.
Whether it's legitimate or not, you have to deal with it. And so we understand
Yes, we
that.
do.
Yeah, so, okay. Well, Mr. Boring, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate what your commission does. It is incredible. We have such a fine judiciary in this state and served by so many well-intended and public service-minded judges. But that works only well if, when the rare occasion when we have one that's a bad apple, can't be dealt with or can be dealt with. And so that is on your shoulders. So I appreciate that, and I assure you the Senate does as well. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll hear next from the juvenile courts.
Did you say juvenile, Senator?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Juvenile courts.
I'll read it. I got it.
Morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm Eric John. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Juvenile Court Judges.
Thank you, Mr. John. We welcome you here, and the floor is yours.
Senator, unfortunately, I have to deal with Judge Hurd all the time, but
Oh, my.
no,
Oh, my.
actually, we've become good friends. So
He's a fine man and a very good jurist.
anyway, and I have Kirsten Wallace here with me, who's my budget director. I don't think we have anything other than the request for the funding for the juvenile court judges' state salaries. But I did want to bring something to the committee's attention real quick, just to be looking at, and Andrew and I can talk about this, with the possible breaking up of the circuit, the Augusta circuit from Augusta into Columbia. According to the statute, each circuit gets $100,000 for the state in grants per circuit to fund juvenile court judges' salaries. So at some point, there's going to need to be a shifting of the dollars from the total Augusta circuit to the two circuits. So that'll be $100,000 for Columbia County if it goes through, and then that's going to leave Augusta with 5 judges, Superior Court judges, and the formula is kind of funky. It's $100,000 automatically per circuit, and then every circuit that has judges over 4, Superior Court judges over the number 4 gets, for each Superior Court judge under 4, gets an additional quarter. So Augusta would need to receive, would it be 125,000. But that's something that, I know I saw Senator Strickland was asking about that quick effective date. That would need to be in there, whether it's putting money in or splitting up what Augusta's getting right now. So I wanted to bring that to your attention before y'all got further along into the big budget. But I'll let Kirsten,
Thank you for that. That's very helpful to make sure we know that on the front end. Thank you.
I'll let Kirsten just explain what's on our budget for supplemental.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the budget director with the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. And as Eric mentioned, we have one request. Mr. Chairman, I don't know, do you want me to tell the page 6, I guess?
Please.
Item 21.1. And that's to increase funds for the, for Griffin and Gwinnett judicial circuits, and it's based on the code section 151152. And that's the code section that Eric mentioned about the formula, that each circuit receives $100,000, and for every Superior Court judge over 4, they receive an additional funding. So these are 2 that receive 2 additional Superior Court judges that would have increased funding. So that amount is $25,000.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
that's all that the council is requesting.
Okay, thank you. Questions? No questions from the committee. We appreciate you appearing.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Prosecuting Attorney's Council.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the
morning.
committee.
Welcome.
I'm Burt Poston. I'm the district attorney up in the Conasauga Judicial Circuit, which is Whitfield and Murray County, and the budget chair for the council. I have with me Tim Vaughn, DA from the Oconee Circuit, who is our chair of the council, Pete Scandalakis, who's our executive director, and Chris Jones is our chief financial officer.
Welcome.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And I wanted to thank this committee and everyone, and Andrew especially, for working with us towards the end of the last fiscal year to get over that hurdle and get into the budget for this year. We obviously took our cuts with everyone else, but it could have been a lot worse, and we appreciate y'all working with us. We're one of those budget items that's all payroll, so there's no equipment to put off purchases or programs to cut. So it's always a scary time when we go through that, and we appreciate y'all working with us on that. We started this year, this budget year, with all of our contingency funds backed out of the budget, funds that cover largest item being leave payouts and retirement-related expenses, but other things as well that we'll get to, and also almost $500,000 in the hole in terms of just regular payroll. So the council took some pretty serious steps to accommodate for that, primarily through delaying filling vacant positions to absorb some of those costs and expenses, and that's helped tremendously. So that's allowed us to climb out of that hole a little bit. But as we said back then, our leave payouts, and that's going to be our first item, which is 23.1, fluctuate from about $500,000 during a non-election year up to around $1 million or so during an election year. This was an unusual election year. I've been a prosecutor for 28 years, and I can't remember the number of DAs turning over in a single year like we've had. I think 30% of DAs in office today were not in office a year ago. either through retirements or through the election cycle. So not only do you have those elected DA leave payouts and retirement expenses, but you tend to have a lot of turnover among the assistant DAs, particularly at the senior level in those offices. So we are forecasting right now about $1.5 million in leave payout and retirement related expenses this year, which is the highest that I think it's ever been. Back when we submitted our amended budget, we submitted 1.1 million as our estimate. And we can still manage with that number. We're not asking to increase that number. The other ways we've taken to save money allows us, we think, with that 1.1 million, which has been approved by the House, to cover those leave payouts and expenses. And I can break that down more for you if you need to, but that's basically what that item is to give us the funds to pay all those leave payouts. Item 23.2 is another contingency kind of item. From time to time, elected DAs get sued, and in certain cases, the council has to pay for the expenses of that litigation to hire a private counsel to represent them. The last part of the last fiscal year, we had some pretty substantial litigation expenses, and that led to the $446,000 that we requested in the amended budget. However, after making that request, we had some very favorable court rulings that dramatically cut back on some of that. The elections changed some of that, and just with COVID, some of that litigation is not as far along as it might have been otherwise, so some of those expenses will get pushed off to the next fiscal year. So we had asked the House to cut that back to $50,000, which they did, and so we're happy. That was our request, to reduce that to $50,000, and we think that'll fully cover those expenses during the current year. The final item, the $189,000, was not a request. It was added by the House, and that represents about half of what was cut as furlough days. So about twice that amount was cut with the anticipation that we do, certain employees do furlough days to cover that expenses. They put that back in. If that remains in, if the Senate approves that same amount, it would pretty well eliminate any risk that we would have to furlough anyone during this year. We've not had to yet, but we're keeping that option on the table towards the end of the year if we need to. But the House put that in for us to basically take that off the table, so furloughs would not be an issue during the current fiscal year. So that's the items, and we appreciate it. And if there's any questions, I or some of my colleagues will be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Yes. Senator Jordan, what are your mic 2?
I think I'm number 2.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. My question has to do with the funds for legal representation for district attorneys. And I appreciate the cost of it coming down. How do y'all approach that? Are those, does the Attorney General's office provide representation, or is there private counsel that's brought in for those particular representations?
A little bit of both. The Attorney General does, as a courtesy, sometimes represent us when there's no conflict. But in certain types of litigation, there may be a conflict between the DA's position and the state's position. And they're not required to, so it then falls on other financial sources to cover those private attorneys' expenses. So.
And do y'all have any insurance? I mean, I know in other capacities, you can always you invoke insurance to do the defense costs and stuff, but I guess this is just kind of a straight payout.
I don't believe so, but I would refer to, I'm getting a nod of the head from our executive director that there is not, but Pete.
Chris can answer that better.
Okay.
Because we do work with DLAS on some of that.
And as DA Poston mentioned, whenever the AG's office does have a conflict, in a lot of cases, that is also a similar conflict with the Department of Administrative Services, which does handle that insurance. But if there's a conflict and they don't cover it, that's when we do have to cover those costs.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Mr. Poston, I just wanted to comment on the adjustment based on the litigation costs, and we appreciate you being on top of that and making that voluntary reduction and letting the House side and letting us know of the need, but the ability to downwardly adjust that. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pete. Yes, sir. Next, we'll hear from the Superior Courts.
Senators, good morning, and thank you very much for allowing us to be here. I want to let you know that we take very seriously your work. Our president is here, Mr. Brian Amaro. The chair of our district court administrators, Dr. Will Simmons, is here. Our executive director, Shannon Weathers, is here, as is our financial director, Mr. Charles Miller. We want to tell you that we really appreciate all that has gone on, and I hope that this might be among the easier and more straightforward presentations you receive. We need no new funds. From what the House sent to you, we are very appreciative, frankly, of their willingness to give us what they were willing to give us. We need some accounting help. Very quickly, as an explanation, as a Superior Courts, we have 3 programs under the heading of Superior Courts. While we can move funds maybe within one program, we can't cross the lines between one program and another. In our initial request in, I guess it's section 26.1 of the budget, we had asked for $46,518 to be restored to our district court administrators. The House version gave us exactly half that, $23,259. What we are going to ask is that you take money from the Superior Court judges portion and give it to the DCAs in the amount of $23,259. We're asking you to do what we can't do. And that is all that we need, and we're very appreciative of the time of being in front of you and being allowed to do it. Our DCAs, quite frankly, in some of our circuits are the only sources of office supplies, pens and pencils, computers, any of that, because some counties can't afford or elect not to afford to support the judges. Our DCAs make that happen. And so this amount of $46,518 really only represents a quarter of their normal operating budget because they lost, I think it was 70-some-odd% of their operating budget when we had to come to the cut. So we had people who couldn't pay the rent on their offices, don't get mileage for their cars, but they're expected to go to all these circuits. So we were just asking that you take the money from Superior Court judges and give it to the DCAs. That's it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Questions of the committee? Judge Padgett, thank you for that presentation. Before you go, let me make sure that that Mr. Zoll here understands exactly what the request is, because I spoke with one of your colleagues and he had explained it to me as well, and I am completely in support, and we appreciate your presentation and the communication of that, and also the approach in which you all recognize the need and you're willing to shift it within the budget constraints that we have. So I appreciate that attitude and that approach to that. I just want to make sure we can that we from an accounting standpoint, understand and get done what you want us to do.
Yes,
Andrew, do you understand?
So you're asking for 25.1, that $4,000 to be moved into the judicial administrator's program, is that correct?
No. From 27.3 or 4 at your leisure, if you would move that to 26.1. And the exact amount of $23,259 in addition to the $23,259 the House had as a part of their budget. Does that make more? Is that okay?
Got it.
Your leisure as to where you take it from.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, Judge. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
y'all.
And thank you to your colleagues that came as well and your staff. Thank you.
Is there anybody else I can give notice?
The Justice, Supreme Court, Justice Melton should be outside. Good afternoon. Well, no, we are afternoon. Justice Melton, how are you?
I'm fine. Good afternoon to you.
Welcome.
I assume I'm up now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. You are. You are here. We appreciate you being here, and thank you for your service. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and as always, thank you for your hospitality and your thoughtfulness and how you've been dealing with our court in particular and our Supreme Court as a whole. We're always grateful. I'll tell you that, as you know, we've been busy as a court, maintaining our workload, but also responding to the pandemic. We have, as an example, our Judicial Council, I believe I've indicated before, which is our governing body, has met over 30 times this year just to have meetings about the pandemic and our regular business meetings. In a normal year, we will have met 4 times. And we have one more meeting this afternoon. I have issued, in my capacity as chief, next week will be 11 executive orders, emergency orders dealing with the pandemic. We issue those every 30 days. And so big picture is our court system, as you've heard by now, is willing to work harder to get out of the backlog as we emerge. We're going to be working harder to do fewer cases because that's the way it works. It just takes longer. For most of the trial courts, for us, we're able to move at a regular pace and deal with things, and we also don't have the choice. We have our 2-term rule, and we'll be getting things done appropriately. We have 2 items that we asked for in our supplemental budget. The first item is 28.1. We asked for $50,776. The House zeroed that out. That was for to replace salaries that were where we enjoyed savings after Justice Blackwell left in a term clerk position. We didn't know at the time we submitted our budget request when the timing of the replacements for those positions would be had. In terms of how this impacts us, that is, we can work with that given where we are in real life. As long as these items are in the big budget, that will enable us to pay the salaries that are due to the Justice Blackwell's replacements, who is Justice LaGrua, and the term clerk position. So that won't cause hardship for us as long as that's in the big budget.
Okay, thank you.
The second item is just increased funds for personnel. So this also relates to Justice Blackwell when he left. When we moved into the new building, we had funds available, made available for furniture. Justice Blackwell had his own personal furniture, and when he left, he took that with him, so we never bought furniture for that suite. So that needs to be done and is in the process of being done. And then also just the items that are typically associated with having a new justice, the robes and the moving costs, and those items taken together are the $14,500 that we're asking for. And then you see the restoration amount that the House put in of $85,000, and that makes up everything that's in the supplemental budget on behalf of the Supreme Court. I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions of the committee? Justice Melton, I don't see any, so thank you for being with us. We appreciate your time, your service, and your outstanding leadership of our court system, especially in the last almost year now, I guess 10 months or so. And I know so much of that has fallen on your shoulders, and those of us that participate in, work around the judiciary, just have such a comfort level knowing that your steady hand and leadership are a part of that. So we appreciate that, and the Senate certainly appreciates you as well.
You're very kind to say that, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Law Department. Welcome, Mr. Attorney General.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for having us, members of the committee. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you. We appreciate you being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to talk about 2 brief changes, Mr. Chairman, that you will see and members of the committee. 219.1 and 220.1. And let me just give big picture. Big picture, these are simply accounting changes. They don't have any substantive impact on our budget, but they are to more accurately reflect the revenue that's come to our office. And the budget numbers that have been used in the past have been kind of fixed. So this would change to more accurately reflect the actual revenues that come to our department. So you'll see in 219.1, this is an adjustment from our other funds budget category in the amount of $21,701,787. These other funds are not a state funds appropriation. Rather, they are funds that come from client agencies to pay our bills. For example, to pay bills. It's our Special Assistant Attorneys General Fund. And Special Assistant Attorneys General are private practitioners that we hire to help us, anything ranging from DFACS and child support, DOT, elections, water wars, that sort of thing. So this adjustment is simply to make the budget number reflect the actual revenue for that fund source. In the past, the other funds budget number that's been used has been around $37 million, but other funds' actual revenues have been higher. So this adjustment simply increases the other funds budget number to more accurately reflect the actual revenues and has no substantive impact on our actual budget. Similarly, in 220.1, you'll see it's an increase in federal funds in our Medicaid fraud unit by $35,342. To remind the committee, our Medicaid fraud control unit is 75% funded by federal funds, 25% by state funds. So the federal funds grant amount that we have has been around $3,633,332, while at the same time the federal funds budget number has been $35,97,990 for a difference of that $35,342. Again, it's a change in the budget number. It is not a change in the actual. It's not a change in our substantive budget. That's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got a question from Senator Al.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Carr, great to see you as always.
Senator, good to see you as well.
Thank you for the great work you continue to do, and specifically the Medicaid fraud unit. In the past, they have more than paid for themselves in the fraud that they have found and uncovered, and we've gone after. Do you have any updated figures at this point, or something maybe you could bring to this committee at a later time of what we did back in 2020?
Sure. I don't have it with me, but we'd be happy to get those numbers for you. It's been usually 6-to-1, I think, is what we've done, what we've brought in versus what we spent, but I'll get that for you, Senator.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions?
Just to follow up on what Senator Albers said, in terms of the money that is recovered from the Medicaid fraud control unit, how many of those cases are straight investigations kind of directly started by the AG's office versus key TAMs filed by relators? I mean, what's the normal?
I don't have that with me, Senator, but we'll get that for you as well.
Okay.
Any follow-up, Senator Jordan? Is that it? Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions from the committee? All right. General Carr, thank you for being with us, and probably in ways that most folks don't think of when they think of the impact of COVID-19. I'm certain you've had a lot of impacts on your office and stresses on what is your normal working model. So thanks for your leadership and making sure the Department of Law continues to operate as it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate y'all's service.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
y'all.
And the Public Defender's Council.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jim Stokes. I'm the Deputy Director for the Georgia Public Defender Council, and I'm here on behalf of Omatayo Ali, who's the Executive Director. She sends her regrets that she had a family emergency to tend to, and so I'm here on her behalf. With me is Natalie Glazer, who is the Deputy Director of our Legal Services, and Terry Rayford, who is our Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Chairman, essentially some of the people talked about programs 1, 2, 3. We have 2 programs in our agency, 1 and 2, and so we're in section 37, and I'll start with section 235.1, which is where we're requesting additional funds beyond what the governor and the House have placed in here. We're requesting $400,000 broadly, and that is in part based on some of the things you heard from the Prosecuting Attorney's Council about the cost of employees leaving and then trying to fill those positions. You either have to wait on, but for budgetary reasons after you do the payout to fill positions, and with the courts coming back potentially in operation, we're concerned about delays that may cause if we are not able to fill those positions. So on any given day, the Public Defender Council essentially owes $358,991 on payouts So of that $400,000, which is in our Program 1, that would be where we would put the money toward $358,991. Again, that would let us fill positions more quickly and make sure that our courtrooms are covered. And of course, when a lawyer leaves who's defending someone in a case, that means the cases that they leave behind have to be taken over by others, and so it's more efficient for our operations to go ahead and have somebody more readily in place to take on those caseloads. Besides that, of the remaining amount of the $400,000, we would use that for operational expenses. And some of it would be to promote the remote and teleworking equipment for attorneys. We've found through this pandemic, one thing is that we've had people essentially maybe be more productive sometimes, not having to commute back and forth. And so we would use this to help with the productivity. And it requires some infrastructure, some of the enterprise Zoom accounts, IT support, et cetera. So we would, along with laptops and mobile hotspots. Besides that, with the pandemic continuing, we would be using some of that remaining funding for PPE procurement. And so even with the vaccination numbers going up and everybody doing their best to get that, this will continue to be an issue for us that we'll need to supply our attorneys and staff with PPE moving forward. So a lot of times there's travel and these things between multiple courts and a circuit, or a lot of high-risk facilities and jails and prisons that our attorneys are faced with, and so we need to make sure that we're on top of procuring the PPE to try to keep them safe as they're doing their important jobs. Also, we anticipate, we don't know what the future holds as far as when our jury trial is going to be put back in place. We've heard from the Chief Justice, but obviously the delay in those things has all kinds of impacts certainly on our clients sitting in jail with no means of resolving their cases, and particularly those professing innocence. They can't even get to the court to have those cases heard. So we are hoping that once these jury trials open up, some of those cases can be addressed quickly, but our main concern from a funding standpoint is that we'll anticipate there'll be more travel for our lawyers once that goes back in place, and we anticipate absorbing some of that during this fiscal year. So those are some of the things that we would utilize the funding for if this committee were to see fit to provide that for us. Also, there are conflict attorneys. A lot of times, the circuit public defender offices are funded for us through, similar to the prosecuting attorneys council, through basically per superior court judge, we get an assistant public defender. As the courts open back up, there'll be more expenses associated with conflict attorneys that we would use that additional funding for. So besides that, we are also requesting in jumping back to 234.1 in that section to our Program 1. We've asked for some additional positions, which would include what's called a JCAS manager. This person would be in charge of our case management program, which is called JCAS. That individual would be paid an annual salary of $95,318. It's a position we used to have several years ago that we haven't officially filled, that we're asking for the actual funding for this fiscal year if the hire were made as of April 1st for the final quarter would be $23,829.50 for that particular position. As we're trying to work through to keep up with our metrics, we're working on making sure that we have a position such as that. Another position would be for an accounts payable analyst. That's someone, that particular group has one person really doing about 15,000 annual transactions, and that group and the fiscal group has asked for an additional position, 71,488 annualized, which is $17,872 for 1 quarter in FY21. And then finally, a secretary position, which is a full-time position that is necessitated by the move that our group made from the State Bar building. We had people in various floors, but we used one secretary for each suite, essentially, to be the contact person for the public and for also just handling administrative duties. But with this move, we've got a group that's over in the Trinity Washington building, and then we have another group that is housed in a building over on MLK. And so because of not being in the same building, it's thought that that perhaps we could get a secretarial position to look after the MLK building part, which it's an annualized $50,182 expenditure. And that is, from a quarterly standpoint, again, $12,545.50. So those are the appropriations requests we would make of this committee. I do want to point out that there was an add-in. I think it was the Prosecuting Attorney's Council talked about. They had a little add-in from the House as well relating to furlough days, and the House did a similar thing for us in that they put half the money in. You may see that item. It's about $9,000 some odd dollars that you'll see a differential as you look through Section 37, $9,486, 234.2. That's House put that in for similar reasons that they did for the Prosecuting Attorney's Council. But with that, Mr. Chairman, if you have any questions of the committee, we're here to answer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stokes. I appreciate that. Any questions from the committee? Yes, sir. Senator Strickland, Chairman Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the very beginning of your section, there's statistics that were provided, and one of them is mental health cases per attorney for each fiscal year. And I didn't know if you had information you could give on how you define someone that has a mental health case, how that's classified.
That office is the Office of the Mental Health Advocate. And generally, that office limits its representation to people who have been found not competent to stand trial or who have been found guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity. So it's a very narrow definition of mental health in that regard, in that they have to be a certain status within the litigation, essentially, or outside of it. It's not, I don't want to confuse the committee by acting like it's just about people who have mental health issues.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering, because it seems a little high to be, if that's the standard for fiscal year 2020, 62 per attorney, it just seems high. That many individuals would meet that standard. Maybe I'm wrong, though.
Well, we can go back and check. We have, I think, about 4 attorneys plus the director operating in there, and of course the number is driven just by how many ever people are still either hospitalized with having been found not guilty by reason of insanity, or people who are not competent to stand trial. Of course, that status can change. That's part of what the litigation is for that group.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Senator?
It does.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't see any more. Mr. Stokes, thank you. Good presentation. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we appreciate your staff being with us as well. All right. I think that's it for the agency presentations. Do we have anyone in the audience that wish to address the committee? All right. Then I ask the committee, any comments you all want to make before we adjourn? And we can certainly speak whenever we've got time, which might be right after this. If you have some time, we can meet. Okay, no questions. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Will that be appropriate, Andrew? Or, all right, got a second. All right, all those in favor? All right, nobody opposed. Very good. We stand adjourned. Thank you.